Here's my story. Okay, I had a lot of jobs in my life. Sometimes people think I'm making stuff up. Okay, I was in the Army. I worked, I did work study of course in college like a lot of other people. I did entertainment business management. Anyway, I had a lot of different jobs. And I always just wanted to be a writer. I mean, I always just really felt in my heart that that was what I needed to do. And so no matter what job I had or how much people thought it was a cool job, I personally always felt like a failure because I wasn't doing the job I was meant to do. And so I just decided, I woke up one morning and I decided that by the end of the year, I was going to be making a living with my words, even if I was just writing the Sears catalog, And although some of us remember the Sears catalog, Sarah does not know what the Sears catalog is. No. Anyway, so that was my goal for that year, was to write anything and get paid for it. And I decided that I would go into advertising because people who work in advertising can make a lot of money. And I didn't want to be poor because I had already been poor. And you know what? It really stinks. Being poor stinks. I'm not in favor of it at all. So I didn't want to be poor, and I knew a lot of writers were poor, and so I decided to go into advertising. Okay, so at that time, I don't know how things are now. At that time, the advent into getting an advertising job at one of the big agencies in LA was to work there as a temp, is to get in the door as a temp, like a secretary, right? So I got a job as a temp secretary at this big agency, or it was a small boutique agency with a famous guy named Paul Kai, who did, remember that Orson Welles, and we will sell no wine before it's time, And he invented Orville Redenbacher, and he invented, remember Bartles and James wine coolers? Well, he basically invented them, right? And so he was a very famous guy in the world of advertising. So I get a job there as a secretary, and which involves very little work because that was when everybody was starting to get Macs, and most of my people I supposedly worked for had their, did their own work. Anyway, and then I started taking classes in how to write, be an advertising copywriter. And that's what I did at night. I worked during the day as a secretary, and then I took classes as an advertising copywriter at night. And then it came to the point where I had a portfolio. So what that meant was I had 10 ads that I had made myself that had my writing and my designs, and then I'd have them professionally produced on boards, right? And so it was time for me to go out and, look for a job as a copywriter. So of course, the first place I wanted to do was go to this famous guy, Paul Kai, who was the head of our agency. Now, I'd said hello to him on the stairs or whatever, but I'd never actually, had a conversation with the guy, right? And so I took my little portfolio, and I was literally shaking, okay? And I took my portfolio and I brought it into his office. And by the way, his office was as big as my whole house, right? So I go into my office and I'm like shaking, and I bring my portfolio in there, and I'm like, Mr. Kai, can I show you my portfolio? And he's like, oh, yeah. He's put it over there, right? So I look over, and there's this wall, and against that wall were about 20 other black portfolios exactly like mine, right? So I put my portfolio up against the wall, and I try not to think about it, right? So I go back upstairs to my job in the typing pool, and I try not to think about that portfolio down there. And so I go on, and let me explain to you. So I'm in this little area of other secretaries, okay? And to be honest, they were kind of weird. I mean, they were weird people. We didn't really have much in common, and we didn't really socialize particularly, and I didn't really hang out with them. A lot of advertising people are weird, which if you're in advertising, you're the exception, okay? But a lot of advertising people are weird. And so, so even though I worked with these women all day long, we didn't really socialize or hang out. I didn't really know any of them, right? So, and I'd been at this agency, I don't know, maybe like a year at that point. And so One day I get this call, right? And it's like, this is Paul Kai. Get down here right now. And he hung up on me, and I'm like, holy crap. I mean, honestly, with the tone of his voice I was a little bit afraid I'd get fired. Okay, so I go, for having a bad portfolio, I guess. So anyway, so I go running down the marble stairs, which, by the way, if you're an architect, do not build marble stairs. What kind of insane person builds marble stairs, especially in an environment where women are wearing high heels? It's just psychotic. Anyway, so I go down to his gigantic office, and my knees are shaking so badly I can barely walk in the door, right? And I go down, and he points to the chair in front of his desk, and he says, sit down. And I sit down, and he just looks at me like Buddha or like Yoda or something, right? He just sits there and looks at me for a few minutes, and I'm like, what on God's earth is going on? And he looks at me and he says, you're a writer. I've ordained it. And I'm like, whoa, right? I mean, those words are like burned into my brain to this very day, right? And so at that point, we just had a few discussions, and we talked about deadlines, and I said, yeah, I hated deadlines, and he was like, well, that's why advertising is good, because you have to turn things in on a certain time, whether you're done with them or not. And then he gave me a job at his agency, which is one of the most highly respected agencies in the country. He gave me a job as a junior copywriter, which, by the way, was a huge cut in pay from being a secretary. And so as you can imagine, I was one of the happiest moments of my life, right? So I'm like floating up those marble stairs, like, whoa. And I sit back down at my desk, and all the other women around me, they look at me and they're like, why are you so happy? Right? And I said, I showed my portfolio to Paul Kai, and he hired me as a copywriter. And they went, you showed your portfolio to Paul Kai? And I'm like, yeah. And they said, you showed your portfolio to Paul Kai? And again, I said, yeah. And they seemed to be stuck on that point, right? And it came to pass that they explained to me that Paul Kai was known for shredding people into little pieces and spitting them out. And that, in fact, all of them were taking copywriting classes, and they all wanted to get hired by Paul Kai, but they were all afraid to show him their portfolios. And then the portfolios emerged from behind their desks. I mean, these people had like brought their portfolios into the office like a year ahead of time, and they were there, and they literally did not have the nerve to go downstairs and give Paul Kai their portfolios, because they knew things and I was ignorant, right? So this is why I say that ignorance is very beneficial, because no one discouraged me because I didn't know any better, right? So who knows what would have happened if these women had been friendlier, right? And had told me that I should be afraid of Paul Kai, right? So that was a big lesson to me.
Did it change how they responded to you, the women?
I don't really know. They never really liked me to start with, so I don't think they really started liking me after that. But, it was a huge thing for me, because it just made me realize that just when people tell you can't do something, don't listen to them. I mean, seriously, don't listen to them. I mean, if they tell you not to jump into a raging river because you might drown, you might want to listen to that, right? But, people want to discourage you. They give you a lot of different reasons why they want to discourage you, and some of them are because they truly want to help you, and some of them are just whatever, right? For whatever reason, they want to discourage you. But I'm just here to tell you, don't listen to them, okay? Now, here's the exception. If you want to invest your money and people are discouraging you, listen to them, okay? If you decide to buy a restaurant and you've never run a restaurant, this actually happened to a friend of mine. Don't put your life savings into a restaurant if you've never run one, because you'll end up like my friend with like no money and no restaurant, right? So I'm not saying under no circumstances should you, I'm not saying under no circumstances should you listen to advice, but when it comes to anything creative, I'll give you another story. Okay, I'll make it really quick. Do I have time to do that story? Okay. Okay. So let's just say the whole advertising thing didn't really work out. Because I discovered I didn't like it. I mean, I didn't like it enough. Okay. It wasn't for me. I mean, I was working with all these people that loved ads. We called them ad jocks, right? And they would read Advertising Age. They would read these ad magazines, and then they'd sit around for hours and hours and talk to each other about advertising. And, you know, I wasn't that interested in it. You know what I mean? I liked it, right? It was meaningful to me, but, you know, I had this friend who had this a dining room table that's behind me right now. And all her friends would gather around it every Friday night and talk about what they did for a living or what they had done that week. Okay. And Nancy, who worked for a state senator, had spent the week bringing over sick children from El Salvador to get medical treatment. Right. And Gilda had helped all these homeless people, you know, and people were doing all these things that mattered, right, that I felt mattered. And then it would come my turn to describe my week, and I would be like, well, I tried to convince people that Suzuki Samurai didn't really roll over, you know, and it just wasn't for me. Okay. So all that work, but it still paid off because learning advertising did help me, you know, with other writing skills. But I quickly realized it wasn't for me. So to make a long anecdote even longer, I decided that I wanted to apply for this job as a reporter at the Glendale News Press. And the job was so crappy that they actually advertised it in the newspaper, which normally they never advertise newspaper jobs, right, in the newspaper. It was like you had to write 10 stories a week for $300 a week, and it was insane. It was an insane job, right? But I wanted it anyway. So I go in to interview with this guy named Mike, who was the head editor. And at the end of our discussion, we had a long, because all the other people working there were like really young, you know, they were in their 20s, and I was closer to Mike's age because I'd already had 7 careers. And so we went to his office and we just sat and yacked for a long time. And then he gave me the classic writing test that they always give you, right? And then he called me back in, and he's just like, Marla, I want to hire you, but how can I hire you? You flunked all the tests. And I'm just like, oh, man. Because at that point, I thought I had the job, you know? And he's like, oh, you buried the lead in the writing test, and you didn't know the, you know, spelling and stuff in the style book test, because I'd never studied any of that stuff, right? And so I said, look, Mike, I really want this job, and here's the deal that I will make for you. Just give me a 2-week tryout. Just try me for 2 weeks. And if I don't work out, then I'll just go away and I'll never bother you again. But if I do work out, I'll wash your truck every week for you. What do you think? And so he decided to go for it, right? So he hired me. He gave me the job. And here's the thing. I'm still a reporter 35 years later, and I never had to wash his truck. So, you know, the moral of that story is don't give up.
How did you get out of washing the truck? Wasn't that the deal?
It was the deal, but, you know, he never asked me, and I wasn't going to volunteer.
Okay.
Right?
Cool.
So the thing is, I wanted to, and this is obviously nothing that has anything to do with my column, which I'm sure people want to ask me questions about, but that's how I got my start. And the thing about that is just being bold and pushy and just not really taking no for an answer. And that's one thing that you really learn actually as a newspaper reporter is just try to try to wheel and deal, try to get what you want. You don't just have to have somebody say no and then you're just like, oh, okay, thank you very much, and walk away. You can just go for it, right? So that's the moral of my story, is go for it.
That good lesson. Okay. There you go. Have a drink. Okay. While you're drinking, you didn't ask, do you want to read something or not really? It's up to you.
Oh, okay. Cheryl asked me if I wanted to read something. I'm a really horrible reader, which those of you who like audiobooks as much as I do know you never want to listen to the author read his or her own stuff, right? But I'm just going to read you this teeny weeny little thing. This is my book. Oh, where is it? Okay. Frumpy Middle-Aged Mom.
And Marla wants everybody to know that this cool new book, which came out just a few months ago, right?
In November, yes.
Yeah, is available on all sorts of websites, but she'd like you to know that at bookshop.org, you can get Frumpy Middle-Aged Mom, and what bookshop.org does is it supports independent bookstores. So you can choose your own independent bookstores to support through that website. So buy Frumpy Joe, look at that. Frumpy Middle-Aged Mom at bookshop.org.
So what you can do on that's a really cool website. It's a great place to buy books. And the thing is, you can just search for my name, Marla Jo Fisher. And you can also search for your favorite bookstore and see if they will order it for you or ship it to you. And if your favorite bookstore is not on there, if you buy it from them, they will, a portion of their profits go back to the independent bookstores, because if you're on this Zoom call right now, you probably love bookstores and love hanging out and browsing in them.
And Sarah has posted their website, including the direct website into Frumpy Middle-Aged Mom, Dispatches from the Front Lines of Motherhood, into the chat box.
All right, I'm only going to read this little tiny thing because otherwise you'll click off. Okay, so but this is from a piece I did called, this is a compilation of my columns, by the way. So how to bug your kids to death. So our school librarian gave my son a copy of the book 101 Ways to Bug Your Parents by Lee Wardlaw. I don't know if any of you have ever seen that book, but the author Lee Wardlaw, actually, she saw this column and she actually thought it was really funny. And so we started a correspondence after that. It's an old copy and she told him he could keep it. This was really annoying. Okay, so this is a book, 101 Ways to Bug Your Parents. Okay. This was really annoying for a parent whose children were already naturally talented in this regard. I was tempted to take that book over to the librarian's house and give it to her kids. This volume had all sorts of fabulous ideas, like ask for a big breakfast and then say you're not hungry, which happens around my house all the time. Or use all the hot water in the shower, which always happens in my house. It's not like children need lessons in this stuff. They just do it fine with no instruction at all. But occasionally, when my regrets have been particularly aggravating, I want to exact my revenge. That's why I have my very own list of things I can do, such as dancing. I don't know about your kids, but my kids go into a frenzy of mortification if they see me shake any part of my body to music. It's even worse, of course, if I dance in public, like at a wedding, but even waltzing around the house sends them into a medical state of shock. Singing the wrong words to songs. Kids absolutely hate it if you make up your own words to songs they know by heart. The other night we were watching the Brady Bunch and I started singing the Brady song along with the characters, but doing it wrong on purpose. My son was so upset he had to go to bed. Stop talking suddenly when they come into the room. They'll think you're hiding something and it will drive them mad, even if you know all you were really talking about was how the cat had just spit up hairballs. Putting my arm around them in public. This is mostly a problem with cheetah boys, but even Curly Girl is starting to act like my arm is a heat-seeking missile if it lands anywhere on her body in public. Having your own tantrum. This is true. I actually did this, okay? Sometimes cheetah boy would sit down on the floor and start screaming when he didn't want to do a chore. When I was in the mood, I would sit down next to him and just start screaming too. This never failed to infuriate him and amuse me. Sometimes he would get so mad he would forget what he was yelling about. Coloring my hair. Before I had kids, I was under the mistaken impression that my hair belonged to me. Now, every time I want to change the color even slightly, my children feel it's a personal attack on their emotional stability. going back to bed. This is another one that works really well. All you parents or grandparents who are out there. When my kids are arguing with each other or refusing to follow my instructions, sometimes I just get fed up, go into my bedroom, and silently crawl into bed. It feels delicious, by the way, for the brief period of time I'm allowed to be in there before the kids are on my bed, begging me to get up and promising to behave better. Refusing to get off the phone. My children have no interest in me whatsoever until someone calls, which is their signal to ask me every question they forgot to ask me all day. Occasionally, though, I will simply refuse to answer them, and they will finally give up and let me talk. Our Cheetah Boy and Curly Girl Sweet, well, most of the time. As for the rest of the motivation behind counter-irritation strategy. Okay, my editor wrote that line, so don't tell her. Okay, anyway, so that's all of the book I'm going to subject you to.
Okay, so let's talk about the book. You said it's a compilation of your columns, and
Right.
it's it's a good sized book. How did you choose the columns to go into the book?
Well, it was basically just my favorite column. I mean, I've been writing this column for 12 years. In the beginning, I wrote it for my own amusement, just because, I was having a nervous breakdown. I'm a 46-year-old single mom with 2 little kids, right? And with a demanding full-time job and a long commute to work every day. So as you can imagine, my life was more than hectic. So when they drove me crazy, I would write it out. One of my friends said, raising kids is like being nibbled to death by ducks. And I really think that's true, right? And so originally I started writing my column because I just wanted revenge, or I wanted a place to vent, right? And then I discovered that all these other moms were struggling out there too, and just feeling exhausted and frustrated all the time because everybody was always telling them ways that they could be better. And I didn't want ways to be better. I wanted ways to suck. I wanted ways to just keep them alive until 5 p.m. Because Roseanne Barr had done a stand-up, and that's what she said. She would be like, I kept alive. This is back when she was a housewife, right? She's like, I kept the kids alive until 5 p.m. So I've done my job. And that just became my mantra, like, keep them alive for one more day, right? It's like the Alcoholics Anonymous thing, right? Just worry about today and then the rest of it will happen. So I started writing this column, and then I started writing it for the Orange County Register, where I worked for 27 years. And eventually, the Register was acquired by the Southern California News Group. So now I write it for 11 newspapers. And so some of you may be in other cities, and welcome. And so it's been a lot of fun. And then the book just rose out of the miasma. Some of you know I have cancer. I was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of cancer 2 years ago. In fact, I'm actually supposed to be dead, but hello, I'm not. And so everybody felt really sorry for me at that moment, and that's when everybody came. That was the best period of my life, actually, because like I didn't have to do a thing. I never had to pay a check. Everybody like brought me food all the time. Everybody did stuff for me, and the of mine came and said, hey, would you like to do a book of your columns? And I was like, yeah. So we did it, and it came out really fast. Everything just fell into place. It was like it was meant to be. And one thing led to another, and before you know it, the columns were done. But what happened was that I was having chemotherapy, so I was kind of loopy. Some of you know what I mean when I say chemo brain. And they're like, okay, pick your favorite columns. So I went through the Register archive, and I just picked my favorite columns, right? I picked the ones that I thought would resonate with people the most. And then they chose them from there.
So what I think is cool as a parent is that, there's a lot of pressure on us to do everything right. And
yeah.
This, I think early on in one of the selected columns is that, this book gives us a allowance to not be perfect, and which I think is great. However, You got to have some critics out there. I know you have a massive following, but have you ever had people say, you know, I don't want to hear that, or I disagree?
Oh, you'd be amazed. I mean, first of all, people will say anything to newspaper reporters. You know, they'll say anything to you, you know, they'll tell you they don't like your teeth, right? Yeah. I mean, people regularly tell me I'm too fat to be in the newspaper. I'm like, it's the newspaper. How can I be too fat to be in the newspaper? So anyway, you just develop a really thick skin because let's face it, you can't. I put a meme on my Facebook page, which, by the way, let me plug my Facebook page. I have a Facebook page called Frumpy Middle-Aged Mom, and we have a lot of fun on there, and you really should get on it, right? Anyway, I put a Facebook meme on there that I posted from someone else that said, you know, like, stop trying to make everyone like you. You don't even like everyone, you know, and it's totally true. I mean, everyone's not going to like you, and believe me, people. The main criticism I get is people are like, don't your children, how can you reveal all these private secrets about your children? Don't your children mind? Well, first of all, I don't reveal private secrets about my children. I talk about them not doing their homework or losing all the spoons, you know, or leaving the towels on the floor. As I mentioned earlier, I don't share their innermost things, you know, although sometimes I would like to because I think people feel lonely when they're going through those kind of things themselves, you know. But what they're usually talking about is the fact that my kids were adopted out of foster care. It's like as if my children aren't aware of this, you know what I mean? I mean, it's like as if somehow this should be a shameful thing. Well, guess what? It's not shameful to them, right? I mean, my daughter, Curly Girl, when she used to go to kindergarten and tell people, she'd be like, my mommy's in jail, you know? It's like, I kind of say to her, like, stop saying that. Stop telling everybody that your mother, her birth mother, of course, right? I'm like, stop telling everybody that she's in jail, you know? Like, you have to have boundaries. I know you're only 5, but boundaries, right?
So that 5-year-old, this is a little aside here, that 5-year-old got engaged a couple of weeks ago. Congratulations.
She did get engaged.
So
and
is not a boyfriend now known as almost husband?
He's now known as husband. Yeah. Okay. So because he started out, okay, so there's a particular boy that she claims I've met before, but who knows? Who's had a huge crush on her ever since 8th grade, when they were in 8th grade together. And so she recently broke up with her boyfriend, and she's one of those people that always has boys on deck, you know, who are like waiting around hoping that she'll become single. And so she does not, this is not a girl who wants to, you know, spend any time meditating with herself alone. You know what I'm saying? Like if there's a gap there, she wants to replace them fast. And so she spent Christmas as a single, and then Christmas, and did not like it one bit. And she still lives at home. She and her brother both still live at home with me in my fabulous tract house, 1952 World War II tract house. And so on Christmas night, you know, we had Christmas dinner and all that. And on Christmas night, she announces, "Oh, I'm going out with my friend." And I'm like, "Okay, right." So her friend showed up with an armful of long-stemmed white roses. And I'm like, he's not a friend. That's not a friend. Friends don't do that. And she's like, "Oh, Mom, you just don't understand," because I don't understand anything, you know? And so I enjoyed the roses, right? So they went out, and I went to bed. I don't really know how late she got in. And I'm like, so was that a date? And she's like, "No, Mom, it was not a date. He's just a friend." And I'm like, okay. So just a friend started hanging around literally every single day, right? He was at my house every day. And pretty soon he graduated to not a boyfriend. And so then he stayed in the not a boyfriend phase for quite a while. but he's this very shy guy, and I never saw him. Like, he would disappear into her. She's 22 years old, and he would disappear into her room, and I would, never see him, right? I liked the tiny little bit of him that I saw that walked from the front door into her room. I'm not one of those moms. I'm like, I have a 22-year-old daughter. I'm not one of those moms who's like, keep the door open and keep your feet on the back, on the floor. I mean, it's like, she's 22. I don't care. Anyway, they were obviously getting pretty serious pretty fast. And she would come in and every single day, she would come into my room and she would tell me things that I should like about him, right? She was buttering me up because he never came in and talked to me, but she would come in and butter him up. She'd be like, Mom, his mom is a feminist. His mom is a feminist, and Mom, you're a feminist. And so, Mom, you would like him and you would like his mom. And I'm like, okay, well, if I ever had a conversation with him, maybe I would learn that for myself, but whatever. And so things like that. Every day she'd be like, Mom, he likes pickles and you like pickles, right? I mean, every single day there was some piece of information that was designed. And then you'll appreciate this, you library people. It was like, Mom, he is reading a book. And this was a big deal because she had a boyfriend for 4 years that she was talking about marrying, who his only interest in life was monster trucks. And my daughter at that point, she knew way too much about monster trucks. It's like she followed all these monster truck drivers on Instagram, and she'd come in and she'd tell me like the stories of the monster truck drivers, and I would just be like, and fortunately, she realized that was not the guy for her, I'm happy to say. And then I said, and I was telling her when she met this guy, I'm like, okay, look, my standards are lowered. I no longer demand that you date a guy that reads books, but could you date a guy that has held a book, who like knows what a book is? And so then that's why she's like, oh, Mom, he reads books. He's reading a book right now, right? And so then she took my credit card to Costco to buy something for me. And she calls me up and she's like, Mom, there's this book at Costco and my boyfriend and my not a boyfriend thinks I should buy it. Can I use your credit card to buy this book? And I'm like, you want to buy a book?
Okay.
I know, and I didn't even point out to her that the libraries are full of books, which being a cheapskate, I would have pointed out to her normally, right? But I was just so excited that she wanted to buy a book that I'm like, buy all the books. I don't care. Buy books, I don't think she's actually read this book, but, it was a first start, right? So I'm inclined to like the guy. However, they got engaged to Catalina. It was very romantic. So he treats her like a princess, which is exactly how she deserves to be treated because she's a beautiful person inside and out. And, he reads books. And right now they have no money and they live at home. So there's not going to be a wedding tomorrow. But, we'll see what happens.
I have a question from Paul that says, thank you for the smiles. No, forget that. The belly laughs. Congrats on Curly Girl's engagement. Do you have tattoos like Curly Girl?
I have one tattoo. Oh my gosh. My daughter is covered with tattoos. And I was just in Miami, and the interesting thing is I saw an awful lot of 20-something flesh in Miami because the girls all walk around almost naked, right? And very few tattoos, which was interesting to me because all the 20-somethings I know around here are freaking covered with tattoos. I don't know what your lives are like, but holy cow. And I was very, very opposed to the whole tattoo thing, I'm just like, why do you need all those tattoos? But my children are stubborn. They don't listen to me. And so my son proved this on his 18th birthday. He went and got a tattoo after I had, instructed them against getting tattoos forever. On his 18th birthday, he went and got a tattoo, but I couldn't even be mad at him because it was a tattoo of my name. So he figured out a way to get a tattoo without making me mad, right? How could I be mad at him for getting mine? Oh, anyway, so on Cheetah Boy's 21st birthday, we flew to Vegas for the day, and we all got matching tattoos. So it's a set of wings.
Yeah.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
It's a set of wings. So we all got matching tattoos from King something or another at the caboose at the container park in downtown Long Beach, which I mean downtown Las Vegas.
Did it hurt?
And not as much as I thought. I have a lot of flesh, if you know what I mean, on that arm. So it didn't hurt as much as I was expecting it to hurt. But I'm not really planning on getting any. Well, Curly Girl and I, we were going to go and get matching tattoos for her 21st birthday. But we flew to San Francisco for lunch instead. So we still haven't gotten around to the tattoo thing. And her body is completely covered with ink now, so I don't even know where we would put it.
There's a spot somewhere for that. Okay, Heather asked if you could please say the name of the comedian that's living in the trailer park that was on whatever show it was. Vicki
Barbolak, Barbolak. And I think that some of you might know her. And if you don't know her, you should know her because she's the funniest person ever. She's really so funny. She makes a lot of jokes about living in a trailer and drinking box wine, which is true. She does live in a trailer and drink box wine, but you know, she has her little shtick and she's very good. So.
Okay, so I've got a bunch of questions here for you. Where were you raised? You talk about that your mom was in the foster system in Texas. That was your motivation for adopting, one of your motivations for adopting your children. But where were you raised?
Well, my father was in the Air Force, so I was raised all over the place. So my family's from northern Colorado. They homesteaded out there in 1905 in a tar paper shack. And so my family's, I come from a family of farmers and ranchers in Colorado. But my father left home and went into the Air Force, and I was born in Fitzsimmons Army Air Hospital in Denver, which later became Lowry Air Force Base, and then later was decommissioned. And then we lived in Washington State, and we lived in Central California, and we lived in Puerto Rico, and we lived in Utah. So we moved around quite a bit when I was a kid. So
where do you call home?
I guess I would say Colorado was home. My father's passed away now, but like the bulk of my family really was from the farming and ranching. They were cattle ranchers. My father was a cattle rancher. He would not approve of my, plant-based lifestyle now. And yeah, I eat plants, and my brother is a pescatarian, so he only eats fish, right? So my dad would be so disappointed.
Rolling over.
My dad would be rolling over in his grave, yes. But so my dad was a cattle rancher in Colorado. After he left the Air Force, he went back to the ranch, and so and that is actually the northern part of Colorado, which is actually on the plains. It's only about an hour from Fort Collins, which is where Colorado State University is. But it's actually just over the border from Nebraska, where Laurel Ingalls Wilder had her little house on the prairie.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So it's very similar to the land there is very similar to Little House on the Prairie, and that's very similar to the way my great-grandparents and my grandparents lived. Anyway, but I've lived in California on and off most of my life, and I've lived in Southern California now since 1981. So this is kind of where I'm from now, right?
Yes. So not to get too personal, but we will.
Why not?
Well,
why not?
We're going to. I mean, that's the whole point here, right? We've got a guy who wants to know, you mentioned in your book that you had an emergency room doctor that was kind of cute at one point. Do you date? Has there ever been time in your busy life to actually date?
I don't date now just because I would like to theoretically date, but I just was really bad at it. I'm not a good dater. I mean, I always pick the wrong guys. I mean, I did date, and I was engaged a couple of times, but it never worked out. And it's just as well, because if I'd gotten married, I would be divorced now. And I really just sucked at being a girlfriend, you know. I wasn't any good at it. And now I'm 64 years old and I'm fat and I have cancer. So I'm not exactly your optimal date, you know what I'm saying? But but you never know what'll happen. Some of you may know Robin Hinch. Robin Hinch was our obituary writer for the Register, and before that she worked at the Long Beach Press Telegram, and she was somewhat legendary for writing the most amazing obituaries of all time. And you know, Robin was 64 when she fell in love for the first time in her life. This is after being married for 30 years to a guy she didn't love, right? And you know, so this is a guy who asked that question because, you know, yeah, I only had one guy. Yeah, so, you know, if you want like a fat over the hill, you know, lady with cancer, hit me up, you know.
You're packaging yourself well there, Marla Jo. Okay, so you're talking about your cancer. You're pretty open about it. It's not stopping you from doing pretty much anything, which is way cool. As I mentioned earlier, and you've certainly been posting on your Facebook that you've gone already to, just since COVID's been over, Mexico, you were in Baja, you were in Florida, and you're heading to Greece.
Correct, yes.
Which is
and also Montana and Kenya.
You're going to Montana and Kenya now too?
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah. So you've got some limitations now, physical limitations. And how has that changed the way you're traveling?
Well, here's the thing, and I want to write more about this because if you're on my Facebook page, you know that I'm really encouraging people to just get out there. And even if you have physical limitations, or even if you're in a wheelchair or whatever, I mean, my attitude is, why should you sit home in your recliner? You know, why should you just watch, you know, National Geographic? Why shouldn't you get out there, you know? And here's how you can do it, okay? You know, every airport will give you a wheelchair for free. Okay, if you guys hear barking, that's my dog, Lil Wayne, who's protecting our household from the evil dogs that are walking down the street. Okay, anyway, so you can get a wheelchair, which I just did because I flew off to Miami for the weekend because I got a $61 round trip fare to Miami. So, hey, I had to go to Miami. I mean, I'm one of those people, like, if it's $61, even though I actually never really had a desire to go to Miami, I'm going to Miami because it's $61, right? And so, yeah, so wheelchair from the front to the back. And, you know, you're happy to have those wheelchairs because the corridors are long, right? And then ground floor rooms or a hotel with an elevator, right? And the hotels are very good. They're very, very good about, if you tell them that you're gimpy, then they will make arrangements for you, for you. And especially like the large chains, like if you're doing like a Marriott or a Hyatt, which I don't normally do, except I have points, so I do it on the points. Oh man, you can get these amazingly, adapted rooms, right? They're fabulous. And they even have, even the swimming pools have adapted things where, like they put you in this little chair and then you go down into the water. So you don't even have to walk down into the steps. But generally what I found is that hotels, they want to accommodate you. They really want to help you. They want you to get out and enjoy yourself, and they will help you. And if you I don't do group tours because it's just too problematic. You don't want to be the one, because I was already always the one who was at the back of the line. I was already always the one who's like, wait for me, but private tours, and you can get a private guide anywhere you go, and you just get a private guide and you just say, hey, look, I'm really gimpy and I don't really know what I can do. Can you help me? And then they'll set up the whole thing for you. And it's not expensive. In some cases, it's actually cheaper than the package tour you wanted to take, And if you really, are full-time in a wheelchair and you're concerned, there are even companies that do wheelchair tours, although they're quite expensive. And it means that you want to be with a whole group of other people that are in wheelchairs, which, you know, is slow and cumbersome and has its own issues. But if it's the way you can travel, then do it, you know?
So I've got a comment from my mother, who is watching
Hi,
you
Mom.
from Florida, actually. And she
I
said,
guess I better not say anything about Florida then, huh? Okay.
you can say anything you want because it's not something, it will probably be nothing she has not heard from me yet. So, but she did say that not to give up because she did not find her life partner until she was almost 70.
Wow.
So there you go.
Okay. Do you like him or her?
Me?
Yeah.
Or does my mom like him or her? No,
Do you like him or her?
I think he's wonderful because,
Okay.
you know, without him, then I'd have to be in Florida taking care of my mother probably, right?
That was my attitude toward my stepfather.
No, Frank's great. And then we have
Okay.
a question from Michelle, who says, do you check flight rates every day? And how do you find these inexpensive fares?
Okay, here's the deal. I'm obsessed because travel is my only interest. So yeah, I do spend a lot of time looking, but there's certain websites like kayak.com, okay, and there's other websites and Google Flights. Now, if you just go to the Google and you put in flights, you'll find the website for Google Flights. And on both of those and other places as well, you can set up alerts. All right, so then they will send you an email alert when they find a cheap airfare, and they'll shoot you an email about it, right? Because what they're doing is they're monitoring the computer systems. There's a computer system called Sabre. I used to be a travel agent during one of my many past lives, and there's a computer system called Sabre, and it monitors all the airline flights from almost many airlines, not all of them, but many airlines all around the world, and it will shoot you a notification of a cheap airfare. And then if you get the email in time, you can do it. Now, here's the key, okay? Because I flew to Peru round trip for $241 because I got an email about it. But if you do sign up for these emails, which I would encourage you to, it asks you to select your airport that you'll be flying from, and then select places you want to go, like Peru, which you should go to because it's awesome, right? Or whatever, wherever you want to go, right? If you get this email, you have to leap on it immediately. Okay, you can't be like, oh, I'll talk to my husband about this when he gets home, because guess what? If it's $61 round trip to Miami, that fare ain't going to be left, you know, when you get home, right? When your husband gets home. So you have to leap on it immediately. You have to, you know, ditch your kids. You have to like leave work. You have to do whatever you have to do to find a traveling companion and immediately buy that fare. Like, for example, the $61 Miami fares, when I saw that, I was like, yikes. And I immediately looked it up and made sure that it was real. And I called, you know, the first thing I did, right, was text a couple of friends. And I'm like, hey, do you want to come to Miami for $61? And most of them were like, COVID? No, I don't want to go to Miami with you for $61 in April. But then they bitterly regretted it and ate their words because now they're all vaccinated and now they wish they had gone with me, right? So my one friend that is actually one of my most fun friends, she said yes, and so we went and we had a blast, right? But the same thing with Peru, okay? So I get, normally the airfare to Peru is like $500 or $600, as you can imagine, because it's South America, right? It's far away. And so I get this alert saying that there's $241 round trip to Peru in November, and this was like May or something, right? So I immediately called up my friends texted my friends that I call the usual suspects, who are the people who usually travel with me. And I'm like, hey, do you want to go to Peru in November? Hey, do you want to go to Peru in November? So I just hit them all up, right? And you know, not everyone can drop everything in May and make an instant commitment to go somewhere in November, right? And then I even drove over to my kids' high school and got them out of class and said, do you want to go to Peru in November? And they're like, no, we don't want to go to Peru, you know. So I'm like, okay, right? So I went home and I had two friends who had texted me back and said, yes, we want to go. So I bought $241 tickets for the three of us to go to Peru in November, you know. So This was the first time I had ever gone without my kids, and I thought it was going to be really hard to be away from them, and it wasn't hard at all. It was fabulous, right?
Yes.
So that's the thing, though. But within 2 hours, those fares were completely gone. So if you see a fare like that, leap on it.
Marla, we're past 6 o'clock, so we're going to wrap up. But I've got to say, an anonymous attendee says, Mrs. Marla, your sense of humor and determination to accomplish things are inspiring. So
Thank you.
That was nice, huh?
And I do just want to say, and I put this in my call-in this last week, that if you are gimpy and you're in pain, because let's face it, when you get to your 60s and 70s and 80s, you kind of are, right? But here's a clue. It's not worse when you're traveling, and it's actually usually better. Because guess what? You're not sitting in your chair thinking about how your joints hurt. So you should just get out there and do it anyway. You will find that you'll have more fun, and your quality of life will be vastly improved. So.
Few things in life are as good as traveling. I couldn't agree more.
Yes.
So I want to thank you and thank all of you out there that are still with us. I want to remind you that we have these amazing t-shirts that Marla said she did not want, but they're so cozy and comfortable. And they say, be well read, with a library stamp in red, and those are available online, and a portion of those t-shirt sales come back to us. So Marla, we're going to find something else to send to you. So since you don't want t-shirts, we'll send you something else. Don't forget to get Marla's book, and this is what it looks like, The Frumpy Middle-Aged Mom, Dispatches from the Front Lines of Motherhood, available in most bookshops and online at, here's your cue, Marla, what is it? Bookshop.org, right?
Bookshop.org. Bookshop.org. Yeah.
And I do have to send a shout out to our Literati, which is our events committee, our volunteers who are so supportive about these events and who brought you to our attention, because 2 of our events committee people love you and have been pushing for you for the past year. So I am thrilled that we had this opportunity. I'm seeing that there are more people chatting now. People just really enjoy you. Everybody thinks you're hysterical, great, all kinds of great comments. And for Cheryl Weiland out there, thank you. I'm glad that you enjoyed yourself. We will have another Zoom, and I'm glad that you thought it was fun. It will probably not be until the fall, though. We'll take a summer break. Marla, thank you very, very much. I think you did definitely entertain everybody tonight with your stories.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for supporting the program, and we hope that you sell hundreds of more books from the guests here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you all. Good night. Maybe. Night.
I'm just reading the comments right now. Okay. Okay.
Wait for everybody to leave.
Nobody wants to leave. Hi.
They want more of you, but we're going to get locked in the library.
Okay. All right. I'm going away, even though I don't want to. I wanted to read all your comments, but I'm going away.
I will touch base with you on Monday, okay? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Cheryl. Bye, Sarah.
Bye, all.